if you live outside of a gated community, if you have a hydrant at all. Now, I've walked around and I've gone around the community checking hydrants, very slightly, by the way, but I don't see anywhere near compliance with an 800-foot standard. So I wonder, do we have two rules? One for gated communities and one for the rest of us? The rest of them, I should say, because I'm in a gated community. I know Chief was asked to bring in today a overhead, a view of hydrants in Bonita. As a matter of fact, I saw it on the last meeting. That view shows plenty of hydrants, but it doesn't show and it doesn't answer my question, and should be your question. Do we have fire hydrants where they are required? Or who determines where they are required? Does DSU put a hydrant where they feel like? Or do we dictate? Or does the city dictate? Or does the state dictate fire hydrant locations? I think we're remiss if we don't know. I don't know if we have hydrants, sufficient hydrants in the city. And I wish I did know. Either way, if we have them, I shut up, apologize, and I still think I have done my job by checking. But if we don't have, I refuse to be the person who doesn't ask. Okay. Mr. Jenkins, by the way, has some gall to write a letter to you telling you he won't honor my request. I'm asking our attorney, two attorneys. Attorney represents the board and the attorney represents our insurance company. If he is anyway violation of law, and may I respond to him in a more direct form than I had. I have to be careful what I say, by the way, board meetings. The last time I opened my mouth at a board meeting, I wound up getting sued by one of the chiefs. So I need some form of support to know or to learn.
Dependent on the insurance company who is doing the rating for the houses.
I may be wrong, but I heard if any rating above 5 or below 5, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, are not affected. Residential rates are not affected.
Commercial was big.
Commercial rates are affected, yes. Okay. Okay, Chief, that's about it, Chief, except I hope we don't end the meeting now by letting the questions go unanswered. Do we comply with whatever requirement determines location of hydrants? Do we have two standards, one for development and one for residential communities, some old and young? Do we accept 4-inch mains supplying fire hydrants?
Would you like the answer?
Please.
Okay. We do have authority whenever we build any new developments, any new roads in Bonita Springs. We have the authority to determine the locations of those fire hydrants. However, once a fire hydrant system is in place in some of the areas of Bonita Springs, we do not have the authority to make them add hydrants. Under the code, according to the fire marshal, who is the authority, well, I'm the authority having jurisdiction, but he's the expert in this matter. Like you said, for the last 10 years, we've discussed this, that Once a system is in place, that system, whenever it, say they dig up the lines like they did and replace the hydrants, that is considered maintenance. So that's not putting a new system in. That's considered maintenance. So under the law, we have no authority to have them add new hydrants or new systems to that existing system. Therefore, however, we do have the authority to determine in new areas that are built, but we do not have the authority to have something retrofitted to upgrade something, because that would be considered maintenance. What they're doing in the old areas of Bonita Springs is considered maintenance, not resupplying, not adding new water mains for all intents and purposes. So therefore, in that case, we do not have the authority. That is BSU's determination of whether they would like to add new hydrants or not. And just to comment on some of this, it says that the district remains uninformed as to sufficiencies of fire hydrants in the city. We know every single fire hydrant and its location and its flow in this entire city. There is not one that we do not know. In fact, we go out and we check those hydrants every year, every January, for the full month. Every single hydrant in this entire district is checked, flowed, and serviced, without one exception. So we do know where they are and how they work. And another thing, there hasn't been one fire that's taken place in this entire district since I've been here 25 years, as far back as what the assistant chief remembers as well, where a fire hydrant has hindered our fire operations. And one of the reasons that is because technology and strategies in firefighting have changed. We no longer need a hydrant at the very first onset of a structure fire. In fact, there's several times where we have laid 800 feet to 1,000 feet of hose, but in my recollection, we've never had to even relay pump from a distance of a fire. We laid, I want to say, 800 feet over off of in the Tarpon area for the last fire, but none of that has ever hindered us from putting water on a fire within 2 minutes of arriving on scene. The current tactics and strategy is: first in engine has 750 gallons of water, pull a line, put water on the fire. Second in engine, if needed, can pull relay pump very first thing, another 750 gallons of water for a structure fire. And if you're not putting that fire out, typically in a single family structure, within 4 minutes, then you're protecting exposures, at which point you would need a hydrant, which gives us sufficient time to either lay the line, the 5-inch line, or relay pump. But you know, I would like the public to understand that there is not one instance where we will not be able to provide sufficient fire protection for them with the equipment and current strategies that we use. Now, the fire hydrants, that may be that's a whole nother, the distance of fire hydrants that in the older parts of town that we have not, that were built basically before we became to the point where we were responsible for checking them for the distances under the code. That's a different matter. That's a matter of BSU. But any new construction, new area, new roadways that are required to have water mains that provide hydrants, we do inspect to meet the current code.
I have to agree. I know that you know where every hydrant is, but it's okay where there are no hydrants. Doesn't make any difference to you if they're 1,000 feet apart, 3,000 feet apart. Knowing where the hydrant is relatively easy. Have you determined that there's a compliance with the law every 800 feet or every 1,000 feet or some compliance?
Well, the hydrants...
Every neighborhood has some adequate protection even?
As far as compliance with the law, every hydrant that we know is out there, which is all of them, under the current code, we understand is compliant with the law.
Well, this is just information for you. There is state standards, rules on hydrant placement. There is also the BSU franchise, which says BSU shall supply a water distribution to provide water to every home and the occupants thereof in this entire community. It doesn't say wherever you want. It says to every home according to a standard. It's not a hydrant.
May I say something? If you built a house in 1980 and you built it to current code, and it's now 2018, they don't make you update your home to the standards of today. I think what the point that you're trying to make is that yes, BSU has to provide fire hydrants by today's standards, but some of the areas in Bonita in the 60s and 70s, they met what was a code then, but are under no obligation to bring them up to the code that they are now, unless they're torn down and a whole area, a whole street is redone and new 8-inch lines. And I think, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they do not make you bring things up to code that were not code when you built, because otherwise every house in Bonita at every level from building that was built more than 25 or 30 years ago after Andrew in '92 would have to be rebuilding, and that would just be cost prohibitive, and it's not enforceable.
Commissioner Lohan, you're absolutely correct. The Commissioner Fitzgerald mentioned a state. Oh, I'm sorry, I had a finger on it. Commissioner Lohan, you're correct. Commissioner Fitzgerald had mentioned there was a state standard. Well, the state standard, it actually does not say what the distances are for fire hydrant placement. It actually, when it talks about having municipal water supplies, and then when you have suburban or rural areas, you don't have hydrants. So they have other alternatives underneath NFPA 1142 for providing water supplies in those areas. So you may not have fire hydrants. That's the state standard. Locally, under the city ordinance, there's a land development code for every new development, as the chief was talking about, that happens in Bonita Springs. So that's where we get our 800 feet for the residential and the 400 feet for commercial. But like you said, these existing neighborhoods, nothing is forced upon them unless somebody decides to go back into that existing neighborhood to redevelop something in there, then they have to bring that portion of it up to code. And that's what happens. Now, there's another aspect that we have is ISO. And when somebody asks us what their ISO rating is, I have two things to look at. If the hydrant's within 1,000 foot of the home or the property and 5 miles of a fire station, they get a class 2. And that's where the 1,000 feet comes in.
And I think that from where I sit, and I think as commissioners, we are responsible to provide safety and firefighting capabilities to our residents. We have a chief and an assistant chief collectively have been here close to 50 years and have never seen an incident where we couldn't put water on a fire because of a hydrant issue. I think at the end of the day, this is the end of the story from where I sit.
I disagree with you. I, some years ago, visited Mount Christian Park, 200 homes in poor condition, not maintained, propane tanks, hanging electric wires all over the place. Prior to my arrival on the scene, long before, they considered evacuating them to get them out of, provide some levels of safety. This fire department supervised that operation. I don't remember, or I never heard of, anyone saying it wasn't right, or we needed that. We should have a hydrant in there. And that's the point I'm bringing up. There are areas in this city where hydrant placement is unsatisfactory. And that's what I asked. I didn't ask about all the rules. I asked, give me, I forget the exact wording, give me the location of all the hydrants in the city, or sufficiency of hydrants.
I think at the last meeting we did an overhead on that, and everybody that is associated with the administrative staff here didn't have a problem with that, correct?
Yes, sir.
I mean, my understanding, we left the meeting, nobody said, oh yeah, well, this whole area was missed. So I think from that point, and this is your responsibility, And as far as I'm concerned, from a managerial standpoint and an oversight, if the chiefs and the administrative staff are happy and content with where the hydrants are, we just need to move on.
I'm not happy. I
Well,
refuse
yeah,
to say
Ed,
I'm happy. No,
but you're one of,
but
does
you're
anybody
not-
else want to?
You're not the decision maker here. You're just the chairman.
I understand
You're
that.
not the decision maker.
All I'm
You're
going-
not supposed to intercede on the side, on either side.
I'm not interceding on
You're
his side. I'm
supposed to-
trying to run an efficient meeting, and you've
No,
made your,
there is
you've made your
no-
point.
We're not timed here, running by the clock. Efficient meetings are probably the worst thing we can do.
You've
The
made your
best
point.
meeting is an open meeting, in a meeting where we discuss the issue and come to some resolution, not to see how quick you can end it.
If I may, Chairman?
Yeah.
Tim and the chief, are there any areas in this city, or this district, that you don't feel we have hydrants enough to supply water to any type of situation that we might need it?
The
Or,
answer to that question is no.
or,
We have thousands
can
of
he,
hose
excuse
and
me,
5,000
excuse me.
I feel that this district can fight fire anywhere in this city because, like I said, back to the 1,000-foot technical rule for a fire hydrant with ISO. It might measure 1,200 feet, 1,500 feet. However, we have capabilities of fighting fire there. We've all been trained on how to relay, forward, reverse, blaze, stuff like that. But back to Commissioner Fitzgerald's statement about Manna Christian, about 3-4 years ago, Manna Christian was redeveloped. There's a fire hydrant on the other side of the road that's within 1,000 feet to the back of the park and the new buildings they built in there, and now it's called Sanctuary RV. So here's an existing area that got retrofitted to the
But
needs.
for 25 years prior to the placement of that one hydrant, the fire department said it was okay, no hydrant. And that's the issue I'm bringing up. If you can say in Manna Christian Park, 200 poor people with no fire protection, no safety is okay there, it must be okay in other places, and I don't agree. And this department, I think it has a responsibility. We all have responsibility. If there is some place, one place, two places, 11 places that are potentially could be improved, fire safety could be improved, we should be insisting upon it. That's what our voice should be. Not to say, we got plenty of hose.
Well, sir, if I may.
You know, interior firefighting, chief, is tough work. Sometimes 750 gallons is enough, sometimes it's not. And every fire we go out here in this department doesn't have to go to a residential building. We have commercial buildings. And fire is a volatile, active, moving experience, you know, 3 in, 3 out. If our men are pulling hose all over the place, they're not in that fire properly with 3 men outside. I don't like the idea of risking firemen at any point unnecessarily and letting them, and it's letting them, because they'll go in. There's no doubt about it. They'll go in.
Chief, did you have a
But
comment?
letting them can be your responsibility.
I did have.
I'll tell you what, Chief. If I've made my plea. I think that BSU owes us a definition of hydrant locations so that we can say yes or no. You don't have hydrants in this location, and by the way, BSU franchise says hydrants. City of Bonita Springs is supposed to has oversight over that franchise. They're supposed to make sure they comply. Yes, sir.
You have a comment, Chief?
Yes, sir. In the end, what we're discussing is what we have the authority to do and what we do not have the authority to do. Under the law, we cannot enforce what we talked about, the past areas of the hydrants. We do not have the authority to do that. However, we do under the law to have the authority for the new construction, as Tim, the fire marshal, pointed out. So outside of doing anything under the law, that's where the direction would have to take place.
I thought the responsibility
code.
for life safety in this community was in the hands of fire marshal and you. The life safety of the people in this community. BSU is not doing their job, and we can define that there are areas of the city that are not, then we have responsibilities to take some action. That's my feeling.
We have no authority over BSU, and you say the city does. So
City has.
have you
oversight
had this
over-
conversation with the city?
All my conversations with the safety of the people of the.
And we
city.
have, and administration has no problem with the safety here.
I wonder why we have fire hydrants at all. I mean, when we put them every 500, every mile and a half, you just put more hose on the truck. We'll get the water. Okay.
Do you have anything else?
I'm not too sure if I forget what's going on. Just go back to, I'm asking for an opinion from our attorney.
That takes board action, correct?
I believe it does.
Can I have an opinion on the BSU ignoring a request from the fire commissioner and advising the mayor that they're going to ignore the request? They probably could handle it a different way, but to write out that we're going to have Commissioner Fitzgerald's request considered as harassment or whatever word he used.
Commissioner Fitzgerald, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How long have you had a beef with BSU now?
I haven't got a beef with BSU. I'll ask you, why do you ask me that, by the way? What? And how do you know I have a beef with BSU?
Well, it just seems to me that you've been doing this for a long, long time without getting anywhere.
Explain to me what you mean by a beef with BSU. Tell me what you think I have.
I guess Mr. Jenkins thinks it's personal.
I have no idea what you're talking about, so.
Well, I think the one thing that puts an end to this whole thing is we don't have authority over BSU. So it doesn't matter. You can be mad, I can be mad, everybody can be mad.
I'm not mad at BSU.
Well, at the end of the day, we have no authority over BSU. And our management team, who is responsible for every citizen's life in this city, doesn't have a problem with it. And I don't think as a board we do.
I'm going to ask the mayor if that's true. If you